The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I am joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. NFC South today. Some big changes in this division with 2 new head coaches and every team bringing in a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah, this is going to be an exciting division. That's a lot of coaching changes. But today's episode, we're going to touch on some fantasy advice. We've got a futures bet for later in the podcast, but let's get going with the team breakdowns.
Yeah, and let's start at the bottom of this division because I think the Carolina Panthers are the most interesting team here.
All right. Well, starting with the Carolina Panthers, they are coming off of that 2-15 season. I mean, this was just a horrible year for the team. And they fired their 3rd head coach in 5 years, and their trade with the Bears is looking horrific right now, as they would have had the 1st overall pick this year. But 2024, they've got a win total set at 5.5. And I think there's reason to be optimistic about Canales working with Bryce Young now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the whole offseason was about seeing what they have in Bryce Young because year one was a true disaster. And, bringing in Canales, a new coach, it's not unprecedented to see a quarterback have a terrible rookie season, follow it up with a new coaching change and be good the next year. We saw it with Mitch Trubisky. We saw it with Jared Goff going from 3.8 yards per pass play as a rookie to 7.2 yards per pass play in year 2. Now, I don't think Dave Canales is on nearly the same level as Sean McVay schematically. I think his role is more of a vibes guy. I'd see him as kind of an offensive Pete Carroll, but the players they added this offseason are really going to help Bryce Young.
Yeah, I mean, they used their 1st-round pick on Xavier Legette, and they brought in Diontae Johnson.
And Johnson, he struggles with drops in the past. He may not give you much in terms of yak, but the dude can get open, and that is exactly what Carolina needs. Diontae Johnson ranked 12th in ESPN's wide receiver open score, and that's based off of the tracking data. So Bryce Young should not have to throw nearly as many contested balls in 2024.
Yeah, they used to call him Drop King Diontae there in Pittsburgh. But looking at Carolina's interior offensive line, I mean, they were responsible for a league-high 64% of the pressures in 2023. So what did they do? They replaced both guards.
Yeah, and I think they needed to. Now, they may have overpaid for it, but it's certainly an upgrade there. I mean, no one thinks Damian Lewis coming in is going to make a Pro Bowl or anything, but he ranked 32nd in pass blocking efficiency on true sets among guards last year. So that's going to be an upgrade on what they had. Now, Robert Hunt on the other side is even more intriguing. I think the Panthers did overpay for Hunt, but that doesn't really affect their power rating this season. Hunt conceded just 2 pressures from the 89 dropbacks he got last year, excluding play action screens and time to throw under 2 seconds, what I think is important to do when you're evaluating Dolphins offensive linemen because they get so many easy pass blocking sets in that Mike McDaniel scheme. And Hunt also finished top 10 in run blocking grade by PFF. So I don't know about what you think at these new guards they're bringing at cost, but it's certainly important for Bryce Young, especially because he's a shorter quarterback to protect him on the interior.
All right, so where are you going to rate this offense? I mean, did they do enough to take themselves out of dead last?
I mean, the market rated this offense 5 points worse than average last season. They're going to be better in 2024. I'd say the upgrades at guard, at wide receiver are worth around 2 points. And we're starting them ranked 30th ahead of teams like Denver and New England. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them score more points than Washington as well.
All right, so the offense made some good changes here, but I don't think I can say the same for the defense.
Yeah, I mean, most notable changes this offseason were going from your top pass rusher and top linebacker being Brian Burns and Frankie Louvu to now bringing in Jadeveon Clowney and Josie Jewell. So those are both 2 pretty clear downgrades in my eyes. Clowney benefited tremendously from Mike Macdonald's scheme last year in Baltimore, but the 3 previous seasons before that, he averaged only 37 pressures per year. Meanwhile, you look at Brian Burns out the door, he was averaging 62 pressures per year in his career.
Yeah, and there's another downgrade that we marked down here. I mean, at second corner, they're going from Diontae Jackson to Dane Jackson.
Yeah, that'll be a downgrade. Now, the good news for the Panthers at cornerback is top cornerback J.C. Horn only got 275 snaps last season. So the hope is having him healthy will make up for some of those drop-offs we talked about at other positions. Still, I think the most likely outcome is this Panthers defense drops off. They were 24th in market last year. We're going to start them in our priors around 28th.
All right, so let's move over to the next team who was playing the Panthers in week 1. And we've got the New Orleans Saints coming off of that 9-8 season where they were just battling all year. I mean, they were sitting just 5-7 before going on to win 4 of 5 to tie for the NFC South and the final wild card spot, but they lost both those tiebreakers to miss the playoffs for the 3rd straight year. So 2024, they've got a win total set at 7.5.
Yeah, and I mean, last year was a huge offseason for the Saints, right? They were switching at quarterback. This year, the biggest offseason change is the defense adding Chase Young, who really didn't live up to the billing after getting traded to the 49ers in the middle of last season. He ultimately did finish 18th in pass rushing efficiency overall for the year because he had such a good first half with the Commanders, and he'll take some of that burden away from Cam Jordan, who's now going into his age 35 season. Now, the Saints also have Demario Davis going into his age 35 season. He's been all pro each of the last 5 years, but we could see Davis, Jordan, or both of those guys fall off the age cliff here in 2024.
Yeah, I think the best news for the Saints defense is they should have a healthy Marshon Lattimore in the mix. I mean, the 4-time Pro Bowler has only played in 17 games the last 2 seasons.
Right. And he's one of the best man cover corners in the NFL when he's on the field. Lattimore's injuries these past couple of years have allowed the Saints to develop Paulson Adebo, who's turned into a solid man corner himself. But a nickelback, Alante Taylor surrendered the second most yards per cover snap of any nickelback last year. What do? They draft Kool-Aid McKinstry. So they're going to hope that Kool-Aid can be better than Alante Taylor. And if he can win that job, all of a sudden you're looking at one of the best cornerback trios in the NFL in front of Tyrann Mathieu, great safety. And if the Saints weren't in such a confusing position as a franchise, they'd be the perfect team to go out and sign a guy like Justin Simmons. But instead they brought in someone much cheaper, like Jonathan Abram, to play safety alongside Tyrann Mathieu.
All right, well, now we get to why the Saints fans are so apathetic about this team. We've got the offense. I mean, the Saints made a bunch of all-in moves the last few seasons since Drew Brees retired, and they've tried to be competitive in this weak division, but 3 years later, they still have 0 NFC titles to show for it, and I don't think anyone thinks they're going to win the Super Bowl with Derek Carr under center.
No. Especially because this is now the worst offensive line in the NFL, according to our metrics, after losing 3 starters last season. It is bleak outside of center Eric McCoy, unless first-round pick Taluis Fuaga or former first-round pick that's kind of looking like a bust so far, Trevor Penning, hit in a big way.
Yeah, I think working around this offensive line will be a main priority for new offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak.
His resume is all over the place. He was in San Francisco last year. Good. But the year before that, he was Denver's passing game coordinator in that disaster season with Nat Hackett. And then prior to that, he was the offensive coordinator in Minnesota the year that Mike Zimmer got fired. So this offense finished 17th in success rate last season. I really don't know how it's going to get better than that. I mean, the Saints are kind of reminding me of the Steelers of recent years, right? It's a mediocre offense. The defense is just good enough to keep you in games, and it's going to make it difficult to ever pull the hard reset switch on this franchise and get a high pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah, that is not a fun place to be as a franchise, but let's shift it over to our next team. We've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming off of that 9-8 season. I mean, they came in with low expectations with Baker as the starter. I mean, this was a roller coaster. They went from 3-1 to 4-7, but then they won 5 of 6 to end the year and win the NFC South. And then remember, they got into the playoffs. They put a beat down on the Eagles, but then they fell short to Detroit. So looking at 2024, they've got a win total set at 7.5. And the question here is, do you think this offense can stay on the tracks with Canales out the door?
Well, that Buccaneers offense was really something in 2023. There was a lot of, unstableness about, they were 25th in early down EPA on offense, and they were 3rd in late down EPA per play on offense. Just crazy. Baker was throwing Jump balls all over the place, second most contested passes in the league. And the market really didn't trust the stickiness of that approach on offense. The market consistently had this offense rated about a point worse than average. But there are some numbers working in Tampa Bay's favor. The Bucs ranked just 27th in red zone touchdown scoring percentage, which you would expect to be a little bit higher with a guy like Mike Evans. And our metrics say that Baker's career year had a lot more to do with the stats that he has in his control rather than the play calling of Dave Canales.
Well, look at the new offensive coordinator. It's Liam Cohen, who comes over from the Rams, where you remember Baker's rehab project really took off in week 14 of 2022 when he beat the Raiders on a Thursday night game after he arrived in Los Angeles just a few nights before.
Yeah, that was a crazy game. Can still remember that one. And this offense brings basically everyone back on the roster after the crucial re-signing of Mike Evans, but they really didn't address the ground game. Our metrics had rated 2.1 points worse than average. They're going to be basically relying entirely on Liam Cohen's scheme in that department, plus the addition of first-round center Graham Barton and another year of experience for Cody Mock after he started right away as a rookie coming from the FCS level.
Yeah, although at the other guard spot, they lost Sua Opeta to a torn ACL, who was in that training camp battle with Ben Bredson.
And Bredson's not going to help. I mean, he graded second worst out of 58 qualifying guards last year in run blocking. And the only guy he graded ahead of was Cody Mock. So it's like, you look at it, it's like, unless Graham Barton is a stud run blocker, this offensive line is going to be tough for Liam Cohen to scheme around to get a run game going in any semblance. And I'm basically expecting much of the same for Tampa Bay's offense in 2024. I'm going to start them rated about a point worse than average.
All right, well, this defense was rated a half point worse than average in market last year, and it looks like they got noticeably worse, losing Shaq Barrett, Carlton Davis, and Devin White.
And also, Levante David is heading into his age 34 season, so the same concerns there we talked about earlier with Demario Davis. Now, on the positive end, the interior defensive line is looking great with Kalijah Cansey poised for a breakout year next to Vita Vea, whose 10.5% run stop rate was a big reason why this defense finished fifth in rush EPA allowed.
Yeah, I do like the safeties here, though. I mean, they got Winfield, who just got that big extension. He'll be playing next to Jordan Whitehead again. So, I mean, this is the duo that won Tampa that Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah, I really think, though, the biggest question marks on this defense are going to be at corner and edge rusher. So they really need a step up from either Joe Tryon-Shoyinka or rookie second rounder Chris Braswell to become a dude, especially with Yaya Diaby already nursing that high ankle sprain. And then at cornerback behind Jamel Dean, Carlton Davis is out the door. So you've really just got Zion McCollum, Bryce Hall, Christian Izien. I mean, I respect Bowles as a defensive mind, but I think this unit is clearly worse than they were last season. The market reflects that, right? They have a win total right now below 500.
All right, well, let's finish up with a team that is projected to win this division. We've got the Atlanta Falcons coming off of a disappointing 7-10 season that ended with the Falcons dropping 4 of 5 games to miss the playoffs, and they had poor QB play and a bad head coach. But 2024, their win total set all the way up at 9.5 after signing Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million contract, and they decided to surprise him by passing on the top defensive player in the draft for his future successor and Michael Penix.
Yeah, and much has been made about that move this offseason, but a rookie pass rusher is unlikely to be worth more than 1% or 2 in win probability. So while the decision, brings up a ton of question marks about kind of the plan for the future of the Atlanta Falcons, it's not going to have huge consequential effects on the team's rating in 2024. I think fans typically overestimate the value of rookies and underestimate the surplus values of players in years 2 through 4 that they can provide to a team.
Yeah, and after the Penix pick, Atlanta's front office kind of used that spray and pray approach, allocating their next 3 draft picks to the defensive line. And they also hired a new head coach in Raheem Morris, which means defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen is gone.
Yeah, not a ton of guys they could have brought in to match what Nielsen did with this defense last season, especially since Grady Jarrett was out half the year. But Raheem Morris was equally as impressive, coordinating a Rams defense devoid of talent outside of Aaron Donald. So many rookies on that LA defense last year. I basically expect the Falcons to finish around league average again in points allowed.
All right, well, let's shift it over to Kirk Cousins here because he suffered that tear in his right Achilles tendon in week 8 of last year, and he's currently on track in his recovery, and he's aiming to be ready to play by week 1. But are you worried about this injury affecting him at all early in the year?
I'm worried more about Kirk than I am about Aaron Rodgers, especially since this is the leg that Kirk's going to be pushing off of, and it was the injury happened a lot later. So I think it might affect his deep passing out of the gates, but overall, it does sound like Kirk is going to be all right. If the Falcons were able to make the playoffs.
All right, well, he's got some good protection here at least. I mean, we know that they have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and they bring back the same 5 guys that finished second in pass blocking efficiency.
And then in the receiving core, they add Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore. And this group, it's already got 2 studs at the top with Drake London and Kyle Pitts. That signals to me they want to play a ton of 11 personnel under new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson. He comes over for the Rams, and those guys love to play 11 personnel and keep the same guys on the field to not allow the defense to sub. I'm not too excited about those 2 wide receiver additions. I mean, Darnell Mooney is coming off his worst year, averaging just 0.89 yards per route run, and Rondale Moore really hasn't shown that much to this point in his career either.
All right, so where are you going to start this team in our priors?
I get a ton of people are excited about this offense because they're starting 6 first-round picks. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, and they will probably score a decent amount of points because of this cake schedule, and they're playing in a dome. But from a power ratings perspective, I think they're around a league average offense. So you combine that with the defense, we basically have a perfectly average team, which makes them the best in this division. They seem basically destined to go 10-7 and then lose in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, this is a wide open division, and I don't think any of these teams are really standing out. But it sounds like you've got your eye on a player on that perfectly average team as we head into our next segment, the fantasy corner.
Yeah, here we go back to the Falcons. I mean, Kyle Pitts is going too low at tight end number 6 in Best Ball Mania. He has a shot to finish as the top tight end in fantasy with the new offense that will have him on the field for nearly every passing snap. Remember, Kyle Pitts had 110 targets in a 1,000-yard season as a 21-year-old rookie.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason he didn't go nuclear in fantasy that year is because he somehow only had 1 touchdown. And then he tore his MCL in year 2. And last year, I mean, he just didn't look right. He wasn't full strength.
Plus, Jonnu Smith got 70 targets last year. You have to think a lot of those are going to Pitts with Jonnu in Miami. And also, we don't like the receivers they brought in behind Drake London. So I could easily see Kyle Pitts getting 125 targets in this offense with upside into the 130s and 140s, especially since the Falcons should have about 3 more pass attempts per game this season with Arthur Smith out the door and signing Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I like that pick. I've been a Pitts believer for a long time, but let's end the podcast with a Coach of the Year bet for the people.
I've got Dave Canales at 15-1 consensus. You could find him as high as 19-1 at Pinnacle. And listen, the path here is simple. Given the train wreck in Carolina last year, if Bryce Young turns it around and this team makes the playoffs, the credit is going to go to Canales. And the no-Vic price on the Panthers to make the playoffs is 13%. You look at the other guys listed above Canales to win this award. Eberflus, Harbaugh, Solid. None of those guys are going to win this award over Canales if the Panthers make the playoffs. And we think their playoff chances in a weak conference are more like 15 to 20%, given we think the offense is underrated for the reasons we talked about earlier in the podcast. So obviously the Panthers are still a long shot for the postseason, but this is a much longer shot and clearly the better value in my eyes because we've seen situations like this in the past. McVay won Coach of the Year in 2017, turning around Goff's career in year 2. Same situation with Mitchell Trubisky and Matt Nagy in 2018.
Yeah, and Canales also benefits from the media seeing him as the reason for Baker's turnaround last year and Geno Smith winning Comeback Player of the Year in 2022. So, yeah, right. I love this pick. But I think that will do it for this week's episode. We'll be back next Friday to preview the AFC South. And don't forget to check out drbobsports.com. We've got our NFL and college football packages as well as a weekly free analysis. So, as always, thanks for watching and make sure to like and subscribe.